Well, to discuss the matter, we are now joined by Andrew Furey, the Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. Premier, always good to see you. Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Listen, you've been very clear with your message about standing firm when it comes to the Trump administration, but I'm wondering what you actually mean by that. Do you mean to say that there's no ground to give up whatsoever when it comes to steel, aluminum, banking, or marketing boards? You know, the areas that Donald Trump has cited as things that irritate him.
Well, look, first of all of those things you just mentioned were pulled out of thin air. So when I say we need to be firm and strong, we need to have a definitive strategy. We need to draw a line in the sand, and we cannot let the president erode that line, or else there'll be no sand, there'll be no beach. I mean, it's all published in his book, The Art of the Deal. He tries to make things chaotic. He tries to anchor people in extremes, and then tries to extract value then in that playing field. So we need to, as leaders, decide where our yardsticks are and just hold firm on them. It'll sound unusual for a Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador to agree with former Prime Minister Harper. Certainly, God knows, Danny Williams wouldn't have, but I totally agree with what he has said, that this is an attack on our sovereignty, it's an attack on our identity, and while we may be in pursuit of resolution in the acute phase, there is no cost that is too great to protect the sharp edges of the maple leaf. We cannot let this scenario erode our identity, erode those edges, erode who we are as Canadians, our Canadian values. And we can never succumb to the concept of the 51st state. And I know most people dismiss that as a joke. I can tell you, having been in those rooms in D.C., he is not joking. And that is chilling to hear as Canadians, that the President of the United States wants to acquire Canada as a state. But that is what he is saying. And his team are telling us to take him as his word. He means what he says, and he says what he means.
Okay, so
he's had 4 or 5 opportunities now to change that, and he hasn't.
Yeah, he hasn't changed his tune. So when Canada then commits hundreds of millions of dollars to respond to concerns about illegal fentanyl and illegal migrants making their way through the Canada-U.S. border, was that a miscalculation then to commit all that money to react to a Trump tweet?
Well, first of all, I said from day one, I believed he was conflating 2 issues. You know, what tariffs have to do with fentanyl is beyond me. I don't think it's a waste of money because any time that we can extract, we can eliminate drugs in any way, shape, or form, or illegal firearms, or prevent the movement of migrants, illegal migrants, we should be doing that anyway. Not for Americans, for Canadians. No one wants to see fentanyl on the streets of St. John's, Fredericton, or Vancouver. So we should be trying to take that off. And if that means increasing our border capacity, increasing our border control, because most of the drugs are coming from the United States into Canada and not the other way around, then we should be doing that to protect Canadians. So it's not a waste of resources. It's not a waste of money. In fact, hopefully it will prevent drugs from getting into the hands of vulnerable people. But I think now is the time for us to pause as leaders and reflect after this last week of erratic behavior and demands, to reevaluate what our strategy is as Team Canada. Because there was moments down there in D.C. where I shook my head, scratched my head, and said, are we just negotiating with ourselves? And if that's the case, if we should just come home and redevelop a strategy that is not one of appeasement or capitulation, but one in which we know where those parameters are and are unwilling to bend on them. Because it does feel like if he's the only one who's making these decisions, that responding to his erratic demands will only make him the puppet master in all of this, and will dance when he pulls the string. And I don't believe that that is the right way to start this negotiation. Negotiations shouldn't be done in public. And while we all want to be advocating, and I think it was important that we were down there advocating on behalf of Canadians, and will continue to do so, he's continuously changing the table. He's continuously setting new parameters. And my ask of Minister LeBlanc was to meet with Mr. Lutnick to at least establish a firm, structured table. Right now, it feels like we're at a table with 3 legs. Every day we get up and something shifts and turns over. So I think it's time for us to reflect on what the best strategy is moving forward. I think it needs to be a firm, strong Canadian diplomatic response that is responsible to all Canadians, but meets the moment with strength and firmness that it deserves when there's an attack on our sovereignty.
It sounds like you're discouraged after your trip to D.C., that you think a trade war is almost inevitable.
I'm not discouraged. I would say that the conversations were constructive, but at times very concerning. Look, it's discouraging when I hear the words come out of the Deputy Chief of Staff to the White House mouth that he is not joking when he says the 51st state. I wouldn't be Canadian if I wasn't discouraged by that. That is upsetting, it's offensive, and insulting. And I think all Canadians should see it as such. I think the problem sometimes with when we think about our sovereignty is traditionally we think sovereignty is lost through military exercises. Well, you know, since 2000, most sovereign countries have lost or diluted their sovereignty through economic means. And, you know, that should not be an abstract concept. It's for Canadians. It certainly isn't for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, because only 75 years ago, Newfoundland and Labrador gave up its independence, its sovereignty, to join Canada. There was no tanks on the streets of Duckworth Street. There was no tanks in Trinity Bay or military ships. It was an economic crisis that caused us to join Canada. And so I think we all had to be very aware, as the former Prime Minister suggested, that this is an economic attack, but it is not just in pursuit of revenues, it is in pursuit of potentially the 51st state. That's going to take a lot of resolve. It's going to take a lot of courage for Canadians and businesses and industries to meet the moment. But I do believe that resolve and that pride in who we are as Canadians exists from coast to coast to coast. And I have no doubt that this moment will be met.
Quickly running out of time, but I do have to ask you, because if not the United States, it does mean that this country, every province, every jurisdiction needs to look to diversify with whom it does trade. Where is Newfoundland and Labrador looking to diversify and find the economic growth if we cannot rely on a traditional ally?
So we've been looking to diversify prior to President Trump because it's good business. It's good for the economy. Newfoundland and Labrador is a bit different than some other landlocked provinces in that usually our competitive disadvantage was the fact that we were an island in a northern portion, mainland portion of our province, so geographically isolated. But full access to tidal water now is a benefit, is a competitive advantage for our products, because our oil and gas does not rely on pipelines. We don't need a new pipeline. We can ship that anywhere in the world tomorrow. Our crab, our valuable seafood, we can ship it anywhere tomorrow. Right now, 90% of our crab, our most valuable species within our seafood portfolio, goes to the United States. But I know that the Middle East, the UAE would want that. I know, Asia would want that. So now is the time. We should have been doing it anyway, and we were. But now is the time to accelerate those diversification mechanisms within the marketplace. That's true across our seafood, our critical minerals, and our oil and gas products.
Premier Andrew Furey, I appreciate this, speaking to us so soon after your visit to D.C. Thank you for the time.
Thanks very much.